Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the minimum employment requirements for Washington Paraeducators. My name is Lisa Preslin, and I am the Paraeducator Workforce Development Program Manager, and I'm here with my colleagues today who are going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get started to bring to you some really good information that's really timely and important about this topic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alicia Erzim. I'm a program specialist at PESB. I help support the paraeducator program and paraeducator work.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zachary Turner. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am our legislative and policy liaison with the Professional Educator Standards Board.
Hi, my name's Trace Leo. I'm the Operations Program Specialist here at PESB, and my pronouns are she, her.
All right, and we can move on to our next slide. So to start our meetings, we like to do a land acknowledgement. It's one small step that we can take to center the importance of our partnerships with Indigenous peoples in all the work that we do. I'd like to first acknowledge the importance of understanding the impacts of colonialism on Indigenous peoples in Washington and throughout the United States. In broad strokes, the United States sees more than 1.5 billion acres from Indigenous people between 1776 and 1887. But today, most of that land is held in trust by the government, which severely restricts the rights of Native American people. But it's also important to acknowledge that the impacts of colonialism do not define our tribal partners, and we must turn to them to best understand their histories and their present. I'd also like to acknowledge that no matter where each of us is physically, we're on the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples whose ancestors were the original inhabitants. I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge where I am at currently in Washington State on Montemora Hill, which is the traditional land of the Sage-House Band of the Squaxin Island tribe. They're also known as the people of the water. I'd like to honor this tribe and acknowledge that they are one of the 4 tribes that reserve their sovereignty and the rights to fish and hunt according to their traditions through the Treaty of Medicine Creek. You can see on the slide that there's a map that cites the traditional lands. So take a look at the map and see where you are. And if you don't know already, take a moment to acknowledge the land that you're on as that of traditional peoples. I also invite everyone to take this time to reflect on our role as individuals, professionals, community members, in partnering with Indigenous peoples to ensure that the lands that we live on can flourish for us and for future generations. I'd like to take a moment to honor the tribal elders and the leaders that have been stewards and protectors of these lands and waters since time immemorial, and also express my gratitude to them and to the land. Wherever you are virtually in Washington State, please take a moment to acknowledge that you are on the lands of the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples, or the current lands of Indigenous peoples, excuse me. I welcome you to type in the chat the traditional lands that you're joining from if you would like as an acknowledgement, and also feel free to add any reflections you have about the elders and the lands as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. We also want to take a moment of silence. As a part of our work here, this is really important to acknowledge as well. And so we want to acknowledge a history of this nation, one that is fraught with contradictions, and for too long, this country's elevated a story of democracy and freedom while minimizing the impact of violence and oppression on marginalized communities on whose backs this nation was built. And today, members of our communities of color continue to experience racism through police brutality, mass incarceration, inequitable education and health services, deportation, and other forms of subjugation. We aim to disrupt this legacy of systematic racism by centering racial equity and justice in our work, and this is how we stand with our communities of color. Before we begin, we want to offer a moment of silence to consider these words and how you might join us in this work.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so to start things off, I'm just going to go over some basic information that most of you are probably aware of, but we just want to make sure we're all on the same page. These are the minimum requirements for employment for a paraeducator that are outlined in RCW or state law that's passed by the legislature. So these requirements are that the candidate must be 18 years of age or older and hold a high school diploma or its equivalent. If you have questions about what counts as an equivalent to a high school diploma, we have guidance on that. So feel free to reach out to us and we are happy to point Jen. You also either have to have either an associate's degree or have earned 72 quarter credits or 48 semester credits at a higher institution, higher education institution, and have completed a registered apprenticeship program. Or, so those options are the ones that are not being affected, but the one that is being affected is the option B there. You can have received a passing grade on the Education Testing Service Paraeducator Assessment, highlighted in yellow there. So that is what we're here to discuss today, because there's been a change to this assessment. And we want to just go over that change with you, because I know that it's going to have impacts throughout the state. And we also want to talk about our potential ways to address this issue and also take questions at the end. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And I hope you all have come with your questions, because we're ready to answer them. And we can go to the next slide and I'll pass it off to Lisa.
So when we're talking about the Educational Testing Service ParaPro, which we refer to as ETS ParaPro Assessment, when we're looking at it from the test taker angle, the assessment is just like a general aptitude test. It's a national test that you can take it in any state across the nation. So it's like standard professional certification. And so a lot of states use it, as the standard measurement for your general assessment. It's going to measure your math skills, your English skills, and your writing skills. And for the person who wants to enter the field, that's that assessment that you're just going to take. So you're going to prepare for it. And you can, when you pass the test, you could become a paraprofessional, like it was in the minimum education or the minimum standards. So instead of taking 2 years of an AA or taking the credentials, you could just take the assessment and you could be a paraprofessional. So for administrators in the states and the school district, that assessment is the measurement for the reading, writing, and basic math competencies for practicing for the prospective paraprofessionals. So in Washington State, when you take that assessment, the qualifying score is going to be 461. So if you want to enter the field, that's a test that you can take, and that assessment, if you get a score of 461, then you would qualify to enter the profession as a paraprofessional. The next slide. Here is the situation. Some of the school districts, some of you may have received this letter from the ETS Corporation. Some of the school districts received this in June, that the ParaPro assessment is given primarily through internet-based testing platform called IBT, which is given at the school districts. So if you want to enter the profession, you want to become a paraprofessional, you would go to the school district and you would take the assessment at the school district or at the school. It would be offered, you could take the test there, and then you could become you could just become a paraeducator right there. ETS decided that they were no longer going to support that platform, and that was going to go away in July. Well, there was that was just a problem across the nation, and everybody across the nation was like, that is too quick, and they pushed it back to December. So you have a little bit more time, but beginning in January 2023, that IBT option is going to no longer be available for prospective paraeducators to use that IBT option, where you can take that test at the school or the school district. In Washington, having to take that assessment in not having that IBT option and only being able to take it at one of their testing sites reduced it to only 5 sites across Washington. That's significantly less than what was available. And for the test to be proctored in a face-to-face option, there are still online options to take it, but if you wanted to take the test in a face-to-face option, it was significantly decreased to only 5, where again, previously it was offered at almost all the school districts, or certainly one close to your area. This is a concern for most districts because the decrease in accessibility for the assessment is going to exacerbate the paraeducator shortage when we are critically low on paraeducators. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is what is PESB doing and what are some of the things that we're doing to help address this issue.
Great. Well, thank you, Lisa, and everyone. So we are going to talk through some of the things we're doing to try to address this. And so one thing that I want to make clear with everyone is that the Professional Educator Standards Board does not have rulemaking authority over the situation. So unfortunately, in state law, as you can see, there's a little snippet here on the screen. State law specifically names ETS's ParaPro Assessment for paraeducators to meet the minimum employment standards. Naming an assessment in state law is generally a bad practice, and we try not to do it. Somehow this happened quite a while ago. So this is the proposed change to state law that we are looking at. This crossed out section in red is existing law, and the underlined black at the end is what we would propose to replace it. So we were basically what we would like to do is allow the paraeducator board to approve assessments, multiple assessments. Plural is the important word. And so we have worked to identify a few assessments that we think might be a good fit. With this change, we would also be open to individual school districts coming up with assessments that they think would be a good fit for their school, and getting those approved as well. I'm going to talk us through some more of the next steps and what this looks like, but I want to let you all know that this is not the only solution that we can think of. And so if you have other ideas, or if you think this solution is not going to work for you in your school district, we want to know. We still have time to make changes, but we really want to hear your feedback on it. Lisa, if you can go to the next slide, please. So, excuse me. We're doing a few things. We are exploring some short-term solutions, and we are exploring some long-term solutions. When we first heard about this, we immediately looked into, can we just change the rules on our end? Unfortunately, that idea was struck down by lawyers. So we're seeking some other short-term solutions, which I'll walk us through on the next slide. Thank you. So the first thing we're doing, and we're doing right now, is seeking an executive order from the governor to make the change to allow the Paraeducator Board to temporarily change those minimum employment standards. And so I want to just say an executive order from the governor is not a guaranteed thing. I'm meeting with our Assistant Attorney General later this afternoon to run through some language with her and see if we can get something approved. And then it'll go to the governor's office, and we will ask the governor to make that executive order on January 2nd. And that will only last 90 days. And so that will give us time to work in the legislature for permanent change. And I'll say the change to the IBT system is going to take place on December 23rd, which will, there's a little bit of a gap between December 23rd and January 2nd. Would love to hear folks' feedback if you don't think that is an appropriate gap. Our thinking was that folks will probably not be taking the assessment over the holiday season, so we're giving ourselves a little more time there. The second thing we're doing is we are going to be submitting agency request legislation to the state legislature to make the change to state law that we showed you above. We're working with our code reviser right now to get it all drafted, and we'll be submitting that as early as possible. You want to go to the next slide. After we submit our agency request legislation, that's due on September 16th, we have to get it approved by the governor's office. And then we will start working with state legislators to find a champion for that legislation. It needs to go through the entire legislative process. We'll be asking that we get this as a early action bill, which means that we're hoping it'll be one of the first bills voted on, and then it can get to the governor's desk fairly quickly, especially if we cannot get an executive order to extend us past December 23rd. And then we will do all the things we do and work really hard in legislature and make sure that legislators are educated on the issue and the importance, and hopefully that bill will get passed. After that, PESB is going to work on all of our implementation, the things we need to do to get this new rule started as quickly as possible. We'll also, in the bill, we hope to put an emergency clause on it, which will allow us to have that bill take effect immediately and not have a buffer period. Hopefully that's making sense to folks. Teresa, if you want to go to the next slide. So here's a little timeline that we are looking at. Currently, right now, we are working on stakeholdering, hearing other folks' opinions, and working on that executive order. September 16th is when we'll submit our request legislation. The 23rd is when of December is when the IBT will no longer be available. In November, we will hear back from the governor's office to see if our request legislation was approved. And then in January, we're hoping that the governor will sign an executive order. And then immediately after, the Paraeducator Board will be considering the adoption of new minimum standards. And then between February and April, we'll be working with the legislature to pass the bill. Legislative session starts in January, sorry. So January through April. And then hopefully the governor will sign a bill at some point in there. We only have control over the process to so much extent, but we'll be working to make sure that it happens as quickly as possible. So if you want to go to the next slide, we're pretty much done with our presentation. We have this feedback form here. Really important that folks fill out this feedback form as part of our process to submit to the governor's office agency request legislation. We have to show that we did talk to stakeholders. So it's a really, yeah, I'll throw the link in the chat. Oh, thank you, Teresa. And so really important that folks can fill this out. It's only a few questions. You can scan this QR code with your phone and do it, or use the link that Teresa just put in the chat. But yeah, showing some support there will be really helpful for us. So maybe we can leave that up for just a sec so folks can get it, and feel free to go whenever you're ready and we can answer some questions.
So I see a question in the chat about potential paras still taking the ETS assessment online on their own at home. Yes, they can take it online at home. That is still available to them. Absolutely, 100%. This really only impacts those paraeducators or potential paraeducators that are looking to take the assessment on site.
So I see another question. Oh, go ahead, Teresa.
Oh, I was just probably going to say the same thing. So you go.
Awesome. Well, there's another question here from John Young. It says, I've been playing email tag with Prometric for months now. Do you know how we are able to purchase vouchers for employees and candidates for the at-home testing option? I do not, but I hope Alicia or Lisa does.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't have any information about that, but we could look into it further. Lisa, do you have any information?
So I don't, but one of the things that we have access to is we have access to like a rep, like where we can talk, we could email directly to a rep and probably get an answer to you, that an answer for you, maybe that might be a little bit easier path. So if I can chat with you or get your contact information, then we could get that answer for you. So probably better from our representative than you would probably trying to get it through their website. We'll sure try.
It looks like another question. Are districts still able to proctor the test at a district level through December?
Yes, through December 23rd. Those who are already doing it still have that capability through December 23rd. Originally, they wanted to cut it off in July, but they extended it through December 23rd. So some people, their districts may have gotten the letter that said July, and some people may still think July, or there may be that word, that like buzz is going around of July, but ETS extended it through December 23rd. But I did ask them directly, was there any conversation about them extending it past December, maybe to go through the whole school year? And I asked that question very specifically, and they came back definitively, no, December 23rd is the last that they'll support that. So. And we do have a list of all of those that are in Washington that we could share out. We have that Excel spreadsheet of those that are available in Washington now for anybody who would like it.
A question that we also have in the chat is maybe Zach, could you expand upon like the process for if districts are going to submit assessments for approval and what that would look like?
Yeah, so if we are able to pass this piece of legislation and it says, right, that the paraeducator board will approve assessments. So there's a few things to know. One is that we will need to be able to make sure that paraeducators are still meeting federal requirements to work at Title I schools. And so we are willing to entertain kind of any assessments that would meet Title I standards. And second thing there is that Title I standards do not require you to have a pen and paper exam. So if there are other ways that you can prove that your paraeducators are meeting these requirements by the federal government, we are willing to entertain those for school districts to use. And so I don't know exactly what the process looks like for the paraeducator board to approve those standards, but if it's looking like we're able to pass this legislation, you all will be getting an email about the rulemaking process that we'll have. Hopefully that helped to answer your question.
Yeah. And then I seen this question come up twice about what testing districts are going to be remaining. I don't know the specific ones, but I can go back to slide 6 and maybe you guys can give some more details on what those exact locations are.
I'm going to enter the question I asked ETS and their response in the chat with each of the locations as well as the potential sites that are being considered for expansion. I'm just going to enter that exact narrative in the chat.
Thank you, Lisa.
It's a little long, I hope that's not a problem.
Melissa, to your question, yes, to clarify, in districts till December 23rd, but the home date is continuing. So there's no end date for that. And then another question that we had pop up is, I would like to list will there be an option for districts to purchase the test at the $55 or will the increase go to $85?
That I don't know, but we can definitely get that answer for
you. And then Carol, if you just email Paraboard, we can definitely share the PowerPoint out to you later. Another question is, I would think PESB would be the only one to supply the assessments to keep them consistent through all districts to make sure all standards are being met. Zach or Alicia, do you guys want to go into why we want to have multiple testing options available instead of a singular one?
So I can help clarify there. So we will be approving, or the para board would be considering multiple testing options that would be pretty standard tests that folks would be able to take. And then I think this is asking about, would we be if one school district was to approve or ask for approval for a specific test and maybe like another school district wouldn't want to consider that. I think that's what the question is getting at. And so that'll be something that the para board will need to consider and take input from the public on. We're just keeping that option open for folks to submit, right? If you have a test that you would like to be considered. Yeah, we're not on the para board, so we can't kind of make commitments for them about what tests they will approve in this scenario. I think we might have skipped 2 questions or 1 question from Heidi. If the RCW change is approved in PESB, it has a new assessment for the para test. Would these be available through the local ESD offices? Lisa or Alicia? You know?
Is this the question from Heidi Roberts?
Yeah.
If the RCW change is approved and PESB has new assessments for the para test, would these be available through the local ESD offices? I don't know that at this point that we could answer that question yet.
Yeah, I think that's something that we would have to try to be working through as we go through the process of potentially being able to use that option. We would certainly encourage ESDs to take on what would need to happen in order for the tests to be administered from ESDs, but that would be kind of an ongoing process that we would need to be working out with ESDs and possibly school districts as well, so that the tests are as available as possible.
I think that will be part of the para board's considerations, right? When they're looking at what test should be approved, how widely available is the test to school districts and ESDs. I think that will be a big factor.
Some of the tests that we're considering, ESDs already administer some, like the WESB, for example. Many ESDs already are proctors for WESB tests. So that would be something that certainly would be a factor and that we would that the board would consider when they're looking at potential assessments.
I would like to, I want to make sure that I look at this, I think it looks like Melissa, where she asks, let me make sure I'm getting this straight, in the district until December 23rd and at home ongoing, no end date. So let me just try to like kind of say what's available right now. So right now, people can take the test online right now. They can take it at a testing center, or they can take it at their school district or ESD or wherever it's available to them through the IBT, through the internet-based testing. Some of them have it at the local level. In school districts, it's at ESDs, and then it's also at these testing centers. But also right now they can take it online. After December 23rd, ETS will no longer support the IBT option, which is predominantly in the ESDs and the school districts at the local level. So that all of that support is going away, and it's reduced to just the Prometric testing centers for the face-to-face option, which is those 5 that are listed in the chat. And then sites can request to be, one of the local level sites can request to be a Prometric site and ask for approval. And so there are 5 additional sites that are in the process of trying to be approved, so that there are more testing sites available, but currently there are only 5. So it would be only an online option plus these 5 sites across the state after December 23rd. That's why the request for more assessment options for paraeducators is critical at this time. So I hope that clarifies, I just hope that clarifies your question of what's available now and what will be available after December 23rd.
So there's a clarifying question of why the online option can't be accessed by districts.
So that's a good question. Like why a person can't come into the district and just take it through the online option, the online recording option. That's a really good question, and it's a good question for Prometric. So there are some very specific requirements for the conditions for which a person has to take the test in. So there are potentially school districts could be able to provide those conditions for a person to meet the conditions of the Prometric site conditions, and that might be able to be an option. That's something that maybe school districts could work out with Prometric, so that a potential paraeducator could come on site and do the online version of the Prometric test, meeting the conditions of the Prometric rules and regulations of what your environment must be to take that assessment, which are pretty rigid from my perspective, are fairly rigid. But that's a great question.
Another one of for when the recording will be made available.
So hopefully we can get that up on our YouTube within the week, but no later than beginning of next week. We should have it out.
And I think we can probably send a follow-up email with recording slides. And Lisa, someone was asking for that Excel sheet of existing districts. Maybe we can just send out an email to everyone later today or something later this week.
Yeah, I'm happy to send out an email later today with everybody who registered. Of all of the sites, and the sites in green on the spreadsheet are the ones that are in consideration to be a Prometric site.
Well, if you have other questions, please keep submitting them. We're happy to stay on for a while. I'm going to put one last plug for our feedback form. It would be, I see not a ton of folks have filled that out yet. I would really appreciate if you're able to take 2 minutes or so to fill that out. Even if you don't feel like you're someone who can speak on behalf of your school or your district, if you're just like, I'm a paraeducator and I go to this school district and you want to fill it out, we won't, say things on behalf of your school district, if that makes sense. But really would appreciate some of that feedback. It's cool to hear that some students are taking the test through CTE. That's very exciting.
And that's really what we want to continue to happen. We want those kind of pathways to continue to happen.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We will just stay on until everyone leaves, and happy to just keep answering questions as they come in. But we're scheduled for number 20 minutes, so feel free to leave if you don't have any other questions.
Yes, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate your participation in this. It's really important to us.
And again, like that, Zach said, that feedback form is really important. So we just want to plug that one more time. It's a tiny feedback form on a tiny URL, but it will have a big impact.
Mhm.
Chelsea or Diane, did you have any questions for any of us?
No, I think I'm okay. Thank you, though. Hello?
Yeah, awesome.
Perfect.
Well, we